I think it's not right to stand in front of the Huckabee sign. I learned that much. So thank you, T. Thank you for having me, Bob. All the candidates recognized by the RNC have been invited to Washington to film an interview. They're going to ask each of the candidates the same 5 questions. I was in DC last week for that process. And it's interesting because they're going to put it up on the website, and then everyone will be able to sort of look and see what they think on a really a neutral basis, if you will. The first question they asked, or one of the questions, was, how'd you become a Republican? And I think that's a good place to start. I grew up in the 60s. I think it's important to have the perspective of what's happened in our past. We've got to talk about the future, but that was a very tumultuous period. A lot happening. A lot of good things came out of it. A lot of, I would say, challenging and difficult things came out of it. In 1971, I finished high school a year early. I went off to Africa. I went to Zambia and worked in a poultry farm for the better part of a year. And I probably went over a Democrat. My parents have been Democrats, but I came back a Republican because I saw the unique place that America holds in this world as a defender of liberty. We'd just gone to the moon just 2 years earlier. 2 years earlier, 1969, we'd gone to the moon. That was the last time the world had a collective gasp about something positive. Everybody working on my farm knew that mankind had been to the moon and that Americans had done it. There was a pride in the country. I came back in '72. The Democrats put up McGovern, and I voted for Richard Nixon. And by the way, my parents, who were Democrats, they voted for Nixon as well. That was a real divide in our history. Another question they asked was, what do you think the greatest challenge facing the country is? I would contrast it with that period. We had Vietnam difficulties, but we knew we were the best. We knew we were Americans, and we were trying to do the right thing. We were leaders. What I answered that question that was asked last week is I said it's the growing cynicism about America that's settling in, that we don't have the ability to solve our problems and to move forward and to be the same leader that we were. And part of that, I think, at the core of that really is a cynicism towards our traditional politicians. So yes, I am running for president, and I'm running as someone who offers a unique combination of industry experience and federal government experience. I was up at Vermeer today. I've run a factory. I ran a cam plant at South Side of Chicago. I have a faint but permanent ringing in my ears from just 2 years in the factory. And I didn't even spend more than a couple hours a day on the floor. I know what it means to work. And to have to get the cans to Coke Chicago in the morning, even though the line is down, they don't care. They want the trucks to show up with the cans. I've lived and worked in Turkey, France, and Zambia, so I understand international business and competition, not from the armchair of a CEO's office in Chicago or something, but having been there. But the unique element of my record is that is married up with significant federal executive experience. I served 6 years in the Reagan administration. I went to Washington to serve in that administration. I worked in the foreign affairs community, something called the U.S. Information Agency. We did the propaganda. I remember being in meetings in the sit room with President Reagan, talking about the challenge of the missile deployment in the 80s, which was so critical to getting the Soviets to stand down, or to put in radio broadcasting to Cuba. Then I moved over to the Justice Department. I worked for the conservative icon Ed Meese. And then he asked me to go to the INS, where I oversaw operations at the INS, the Border Patrol, the inspectors at the ports of entrance. Then I was back out into industry, and I came back into the federal government in '01, about a month before 9/11, at OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, which is a real choke point for most of the things that go on in the government, other than the National Security Council. I helped create the Homeland Security Department after 9/11, one of 5 people that the White House had working on that project. And then the president asked me to go run the IRS, which I did for 4 years. And I can tell you there was no political targeting when I was there. We ran a clean shop. So I have a lot of experience, and that, I think, is absolutely essential given the very real challenges we face. I've got a 6-point program. You all should have a card. I'm just going to run quickly through it before Bob gives me the hook. The first point is tax reform. I've been in industry here and abroad, and I've run our tax system. I advocate a hybrid program where we would put in a consumption tax. That would enable us to take 150 million Americans off the income tax rolls. You wouldn't have to go through that annual hassle of dealing with the IRS. Any couple earning $100,000 or less would be freed of that burden. You'd leave the income tax in place for the high earners, but at much lower rates, and you could lower the rates for businesses so we'd be more competitive. It's a balanced approach, and it replaces the revenues we have now and will help our economy grow. The second point is about our financial institutions. The mega banks have taken more and more of the assets, and they've been lawless. I was on the President's Corporate Fraud Task Force. We put Ken Lay, Scrushy, Ebers, Kozlowski in jail. This administration has just been shaking down the big banks. They've paid tens of billions of dollars of fines for their lawless acts. That has to come to an end, and we have to reinvigorate the community banks, which have been atrophying. I've been in 30 states around the country in the last 2 years, and I can tell you, wherever you go, the story's the same. Geez, if the lending conditions were the same when I started as they are now, I never would have made it. So we've got to look at the financial institutions. The third point is about our foreign affairs. We need to move away from dealing with our adversaries. The president has done that. He's been true to his word, and get back to where we deal with our own security and our allies. And in that regard, I suggest we bring back the draft. I think that we've lost our sense of shared sacrifice, and we need to have people, rich and poor, powerful, not serving. I live in Mississippi. That has the lowest per capita income in the country. If you live in Mississippi, you are twice as likely to be a Gulf era vet than if you live in Connecticut, which has the highest per capita income. If we have kids from Greenwich working with in a platoon, kids from Purvis, Mississippi, they'll all be the beneficiary. The fourth point is about spending. If we don't get on true entitlement reforms now, the younger people, there won't be the ability to take care of your future, and we won't be able to fund our defense. We need to make decisions now. I do not favor increasing taxes for the higher end, but I would means test eligibility on some of the benefit programs and push out some of the eligibility dates. It's just what Reagan and O'Neill did years ago when they had to fix Social Security. The fifth point is about immigration. We need to change the legal system so we are favoring people who contribute to the country. We need to secure our borders, and by that, it's not just about the Southwest. It's also about the visa issuance, because a lot of the people who remain here illegally, they've come legally and just stay. Then we need to get the interior enforcement ramped up through electronic verification, E-Verify, which means before you hire somebody, you check to see if they're here legally or not. But then when you've done that, I believe you will choke off the future illegal immigration. You are left with a very difficult question about what to do about the 10 or 12 million people who are here. I would suggest to you that what we should do is, if you've been here and you've been law-abiding other than your immigration status, I would put those people on a path to citizenship. Have them learn English, yes, but I think the important concept here is to reinforce our tradition of assimilation, which is so essential to how we've become the America we've become. And I say we do this because if we're not going to be able to ship them back, I can tell you, I deported hundreds of thousands of people. I know how the system works and how creaky it is. Very difficult. It would be very disruptive to our society and to our economy. It will not happen. Secondly, We need to have everybody pulling in the same direction. I've lived in France. They don't have the tradition of assimilation, and they are paying for it. You look at what happens with the radical Islam, they are not able to confront it. We need to be one America, one community, all pulling in the same direction. My last point, which is perhaps the most important, is about constitutional governance. I have run two of the most sensitive arms of our government, immigration and tax. They're jobs I was asked to do, not jobs I sought. I was asked to do those jobs and did them. Anybody will tell you I've executed the laws as written, not as I might wish them to be. You have my word that that's what I will do if I am your president. And that is essential, because while I have policy disagreements with the president, I find the area where I am most upset is with the use of the pen, the executive order. I just made a case for immigration reform, but I abhor his executive order on immigration. And as someone who ran the IRS, this willy-nilly waiving of deadlines is really atrocious in the Affordable Care Act. So that's one point. The second point that goes with it, I can tell you from personal experience that by year 3 of any administration, and I have served, unlike any other candidate, in 2 very different administrations. By year 3, everybody up and down the line is worried about their reelect. Will they have to go back to Marion County after just moving to Washington because their guy is out? That is atrocious. When you get the job of running the executive branch, you and your team should be thinking about the national interest and not worrying about political self-interest. So I am telling you, I am running for a single term. You will get my best from day 1 till the end. And secondly, I will advocate a constitutional amendment that will bind future presidents to a single 5- or 6-year term. That's the program, and I'm going to close by saying I've got an active office here in Iowa. I'm here because I respect your role. I reject the notion that the moneyed donors and the media will buy this election. So I am arguing for your support, and I ask you to be vocal. If you think that Iowa matters, then you need to be saying to the folks at Fox, you're going to set a 1% threshold for participation in the debate? The margin of error is 3 or 4% on the polls. You score at 0.5%, you might really be at 3.5%. What we're doing right now is we're accelerating the electoral process by a full 6 months in the way we're screening out the candidates. You should get up in arms and make some noise about that. Thank you, and I'll take your questions afterwards.